So Friday afternoon presentation. Thank you, Chris, for the invitation. And we just all hopefully had some sugar. I thought I'd give a bit of a talk from an ANZ perspective, but before I begin, because when Chris asked me to do this, he said, I said, Chris, I haven't got an academic paper on it. And he said, no, I just want a practitioner. And I said, well, I've been attempting to do this for about 10 years, so I can talk to about that experience. So before I talk too much about ANZ, I thought I'd just share some of my views, if you like, from a long period in this space about trying to create value. And I guess the first thing I'd like to do is draw on some of the previous speakers' views. Everyone here, I'm sure, knows about the triple bottom line, environmental and social and economic value. When I left McKinsey, I kind of read, I left McKinsey at the start of the dot-com boom to go work for Paul Gilding, who was starting up Ecos Corporation, and he said, I think I want to make money and I need a consultant. And you come from McKinsey, can you come and help me set this up? And, Ecos Corporation, all my colleagues were going to dot-com Valley, and I was starting at Ecos. And Paul said, look, I've got this client, Pont, with a guy called Paul Thibault, and some of you may or may not know Paul. He's amazing in this space. And at the time, DuPont were really starting to look at the way they produce their goods and services. I don't know if many of you know, after the US military, DuPont is the largest exporter by volume out of the US in terms of their products and services. And being a scientific company, they had done the footprint of a lot of their products before people did that. And they realised that their most carbon-intensive material was a certain chemical, and they said, right, we want to reduce that by 60%. And because they had this target to reduce their footprint and to do it in a way that would still make them money and save costs. And so being scientists, they then spent 3 or 4 years working out a new process to reduce this chemical to achieve that target. And for me, that was a really good insight into a different way of thinking. I'll also share another anecdote. At the time, we were working with SC Johnson in the US. Do many of you know SC Johnson? What would you say is the purpose of SC Johnson's products? Cleaning, yeah? And have you seen their ads? They're always, with mums. Well, Paul got up in front of SC Johnson Executive Group and said, you make poisons. No, we don't. We're a family business. No, you make poisons. No, we don't. We're a family business cleaning products. We create safer homes. And he said, no, you make poisons. And he actually had one of their cleaning products and it had the poison label on it. Yeah. And that was a turning point for them where they said, actually, we haven't thought about what we're putting in these cleaning products. Are they harming the kids in the homes? And they were mortified. They were deeply upset that they thought the noble purpose of their company was cleaning products, but what they were doing was actually making poisons. And they just couldn't put the two together. And, I think that is a classic example in my mind of this concept of shared value coming to fruition. And because I was fresh out of McKinsey when I started working for Paul, he took a little while to retrain me, shall I put it, in a different way of thinking. And one of the concepts, it probably took me a good 18 months working with him to understand, is that there isn't a triple bottom line. Companies operate within society's values and needs. And so thank you to someone, we just was talking, I don't know if any of you have seen, I was just having a look at it, the donut theory by Kate Raworth. This whole notion that, I can just use this. This is like the world, the economy, and we operate within a social license to operate and a license to grow. And it's one of the things that Paul taught me right back then is companies exist within a social license to operate, and once you've got a social license to operate, then you can grow. And I think that's something I've always stuck in my mind. And then at my time at McKinsey, I did a lot of work on shareholder value. And if you look at cash flows of companies, there's typically revenue, cost, there's tax, there's regulations, and you look at earnings per share. in those companies, I mean, it's very interesting to look at the work you're doing. Those companies that typically get the social license to operate and then get given the social license to grow, typically, over the long term, they're the ones that are the sustainable companies. And I don't know if there's been research done. I'd be quite interested to see the exact correlations between those two ideas. But I just thought I'd share those kind of stories with you as anecdotes around this notion of why do companies exist and why I think it's really important. You know, I remember when I was at Oxford studying economics, environmental economics, and this whole idea of externalities, and you know, the macroeconomic system is based on perfect information. We don't live in perfect information. So the notion that capitalism is perfect is wrong, but the notion that we are in an economy that we're supporting certain businesses or not and have choice about which businesses we choose, the economic system is the system we've got, it's the best we've got, so let's work within that to create companies that deliver the things like we need: homes, roads, schools, energy, water, all those things. So that's kind of going back to the idea of what is the purpose of a company and what is it delivering, and is it delivering it with the framework of that kind of social license to operate and grow. So background, within that context, how do I try to fit that into what we're doing at ANZ in the environment role I have? And I have a twofold role. The first part is looking at our footprint. So ANZ is in 33 countries now. We have over 3,500 commercial offices, retail sites, and data centres. And one of the things that we've started to think about more formally in our corporate sustainability strategy, which was refreshed, revised last year, is the notion of licence to operate and then licence to grow. And the licence to grow things are like our financial inclusion programs that are quite distinctive to the finance community. Licence to operate, what comes under there are things like environment, so making sure we do a good job on environmental compliance, our buildings and so on are meeting a certain standard. Supply chain is part of that mix. Our diversity targets as a company, so they're all, what we see them all as is the bare minimum. You have to do that. It's what's seen to be done as a good corporate citizen to get social licence to operate. And where does that social licence to operate come from? I mean, it's from the shareholders, it's from our customers, it's from our clients, and it's from the staff actually. The things I get asked often from staff are, our recycling's not good enough, or tell us about your carbon neutrality. So people really do care about that, and they want to be working in a company that delivers that. So our team, you know, I was just going to take you through some of the activities. This is the vision of our team, and we've debated this a lot, it's about driving cost reductions, capture revenue opportunities, and enhancing our reputation. And when I say drive cost reduction, because of my background's engineering, I've always thought there must be a better way for us to use resources. If you're using less resources, that's less money, that's a good thing for the planet. And so that's what kind of drives that. Captures revenue opportunities, so obviously, you know, we've done a lot of project finance deals in the renewables space, you know, actively looking for those opportunities across our markets and then enhancing our reputation. Things that we've done, I'll just take you through now some of the examples of where we're trying to do that internally as an organisation. So some of you may have seen our new building in Sydney, which is just up the road. This is the first building we did, like moving to effectively flexible working, 6-star Green Star was our ANZ Centre in Melbourne. And we now have, in this 6,000-seater building, 7,200 staff based there. So the maths of that is when people go on annual leave or meetings and so on, you can fit more people into that. But the most important change in this kind of working, and we're seeing this in Sydney, is instead of having a traditional office where everyone sits in their little silos, we've put people together around workstations or work pods, and it's created a different culture in the organisation where there's more collaboration. Some of you that are Sydney-siders will have heard of the Balmain Burn. In our new Sydney office, you can actually go up 20 flights of stairs because we've built the stair in the centre of the building to try and create connectedness. So it's those kind of things. We're trying to think differently about the buildings we occupy to it hasn't quite made the correlation improve productivity, but certainly not decrease it, and improve working across all those groups. So that's an example. Another one is our branch retrofit program. So we've, many of the sustainability people here, we're looking at projects that have really good paybacks to reduce our energy water waste. And so, we're starting to roll this out. One of the lovely things I find in working in an international company across Asia is you have to think of it differently. So when unfortunately, there was the Christchurch earthquakes, people need money in an earthquake, so what do? We put a container ship down. Well, we've now got a permanent container ship. If any of you have been to the Christchurch Mall, and it's branded blue, and the Westpac one's branded red next door in CBA. We found the container ship retail branch is very good in places like Papua New Guinea or Fiji, where you have cyclones and flooding. It's easy to clean and get up and running. We have branches in a box. So after the New South Wales floods last year, we could make sure people have money. So it's thinking a bit outside the box in terms of the way you deliver those services. And so some of the trials that we've been doing, are delivering the savings. So what I try to do internally when I build the case for these is I focus as much on cost savings actually as the outcome. People assume if I'm there as the environmental person, there'll be an environmental benefit in many cases. But what I try to do is say, this is good paybacks, it's within the lease expiry, it's safe to put in, it's going to improve customer experience. This is the business case, now let's do it. And the nice thing is we've started to think about it in a holistic way across our asset strategies. And the other thing, I guess we've been doing it in different markets. So New Zealand have been doing this for since 2010 and tracking it very closely, and you can see a kind of year on year. I think one of the interesting things in some of the properties that we're dealing with is often you can get quick wins, but you have to fine-tune things over time. So depending on, low cost and quick wins might be changing the thermostats or changing the time of use. But then if you put in capital projects, you get that step change. We've just set for the first time a target across global for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the joy and the challenge is also we're finding with our colleagues across Asia, they've got very different maturity levels. So some of the countries are like embracing it and going for it, and others are like, this is all, So it's part of the challenge is how do we convince them that the value is there for them to be doing this as well. One of the things I thought I'd show is, if you haven't seen it, is some research that's been done about Green Star buildings and basically valuations in terms of returns on buildings. And one of the things I think is really interesting in Australia, which is leading the world, is those buildings which have higher star ratings are getting higher returns. And this was a comment made earlier. So, if you're in buildings or you're selecting buildings, they're generally getting a higher value, they're getting a better tenant. And so I think one of the interesting things about this is a chicken and egg, but I think it's clear there's a correlation now between this. Whoops, there's just one other thing. Let's just go to the last slide. So the other area that I'm responsible for is energy procurement in Australia for us. So one of the wonderful things that's happening in the Australian energy mix at the moment and globally is this whole notion of distributed energy and the way that's being used. So we're starting to look at much better fine-tuning of our buildings, so reducing cost and reducing our usage, but as well as that, looking for options where we can put renewable energy on it. And, there's different ways that can be financed as well. So I guess if there's one message that I get across is ultimately in this space, I think it's about creating value, but what you're doing is the activity that's enhancing societal value and environmental good. So in everything we're doing, we're putting the business case together. So we'll do the net present value analysis, the payback analysis and the like. And then it's those business cases, then you measure the environmental outcome as well. I guess the final thing I'd say is, having also been COO of Low Carbon Australia, one of the things I was most proud about when we developed that is we've actually we set that organisation to actually make a return, because Low Carbon Australia was about making loans, not necessarily grants for renewable energy efficiency projects, which was very unusual in a government-funded context. And I can remember many of the debates we had with our board at the start of the whole creation of the organisation, where I said, yes, we've got to make a return, but there are trade-offs. And so we also used to measure for each project what was the carbon being saved. And so we had a combination of reporting against the carbon being saved, and that was translated into a value based on the carbon value, as well as the actual return to the project. And I think it's quite hard to do that. You have to think a bit differently. It took us many iterations with Treasury to have the methodology agreed. But if you start from that premise at the start, what is the purpose of the organisation and why do we exist, fitting within that framework, and you create the value from there. So hopefully that makes some sense. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Catherine.